Hey everybody, it's Eric Dorward here with another phase of our construction of the Vesta Intruder. In the last segment, we finished, or at least I finished, constructing the fins. Some of them look like this, which required a bit of extra work. Got three of those. And then we have three less sophisticated looking fins, all of which are important. It's time to attach them. So I've already taken the time to mark off, measure everything that needs to be done, well, at least do the line marking using the diagram from the instructions, which is right here. So if you recall, that goes round, it gets taped. You make little marks at the front and the end, and then you connect them using door jam, ideally, or some other bit of technology that you happen to have. Now, before I get doing too much else, I do want to look and check the instructions to see where I'm going to be attaching the launch lugs. Now that's going to be done significantly farther along in the instructions, but I want to measure them while this is still just a tube. It doesn't have any fins or anything like that coming out of it. So let's do that now. The instructions say that we are going to mark off, first of all, I gotta find my launch lug one. There we are. We're going to mark a 1/2 inch from the business end, so that would be right there. And then the 8.5 inch mark. And typically this is the where the back end is going to go, but apparently this is where the front end is going to go. These don't need to be super precise, but there they are. I don't believe I need to make any other measurements on this tube because the fins are all going to be right at the back, and we've got other decorations that are going to go right at the front. So we don't need to worry about that. While we're thinking about the launch lug, though, it wouldn't hurt to build the little standoffs. They are quick and easy, at least. And at this point, I'm actually going to switch out from my wax paper here. So these little bits are just little rectangles, essentially. They are standoffs because the fins, the nose cones, a variety of other things might get in the way. So the launch lug, we don't want that. So all they do is just allow the rocket to launch more cleanly. So, gotta find the launch lug. There it is, deep in the bowels of the pieces I haven't yet used. There's the launch lug. Now, this is a 3/16 launch lug. 3/16 rod obviously is bigger in diameter than the 1/8 that is typical of smaller rockets. This one, we actually need to cut it in half, because we got two pieces. So you certainly can measure this and get it exactly in the middle. I'm just going to eyeball it though. So I'm breaking out my scissors. It says to use a knife too. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use my scissors. There we go. And that's pretty good. And so is that. So hooray. This is easy work. We need two of these things, obviously. So we're just going to put glue on, well, actually, yeah, just making sure I'm doing this right, because it doesn't, typically you mount them like this. So you would have the wide end, well, you're gluing it to the thin end, but the instructions here, it looks like we're actually going to be gluing it to the wide end, but it's so hard to tell. Truthfully, it shouldn't make much difference. But hey, well, it looks like the wide end, so that's what we'll do. This does not require any of our more sophisticated gluing techniques. I'm just going to put glue on here. I'm going to spread it even with my dowel. And then I am going to stick the launch lug on, like so. Just do your best to not get any of the glue inside the launch lug, because that would definitely, well, it would be bad. You don't want the glue in the launch lug because it would make the launch lug less effective, get stuck on things. I want this to be as aligned as possible, and the launch lug's kind of smushed as part of the result of cutting it. It's going to happen one way or the other. I generally find scissors smush the launch lug less, but they smushed that one a decent amount. All right, so that's done. repeat the process. There we go. Spread it out. Yeah, I'm not bothering to do the 2-layer technique on this because it is not a structural element. It's going to have some forces acting upon it, but those forces are going to be pretty trivial. And they're not going to be attempting to rip the launch lug off this little piece of wood for the most part. All right. Just checking my alignment there. Looks pretty good. So those go off to dry. All right. Wax paper can go away. Sanding newspaper can go away. Although we are going to do a bit of sanding. Now, the next step in the process is, of course, that we're actually going to, attach the fins. We are going to use our typical 2-layer of glue, somewhat time-consuming construction process. So we'll need my stick and such. But before we do that, we are going to make one little addition, and that is, this is the underside of one of the thick fins that we've constructed with the extra decoration. I am going to sand this, but not just flat, which is, that wouldn't be a bad idea. But this is going on a rounded surface. So if I sand it flat, then the edges are going to be, just by very nature, they're going to be a bit farther away from the tube than I would like. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of sandpaper, and I'm going to wrap it, just hold it in place around the tube. And then I'm going to sand, and I'm going to make sure that I'm doing this in a straight line. So I'm going to try to follow one of the lines that I've already drawn on here. And I'm just going to sand it up and down. If I did this long enough, it would conform the shape of the underside of the fin to the tube. I am not going to sand it long enough for that to happen in all likelihood. First of all, this needed to be sanded. And just looking at it right now, I can see that a decent amount of the laser cut ugliness came off. But it would be nice to have some beginnings of the conformal shape that you would get if you did this long enough. Especially want to work on the back now, because that part was still looking kind of bad. Okay. Just looking down the barrel, so this part didn't change too much, but up here did. I can see the shape starting to take, the conformal nature starting to come into these pieces. So that's good enough. I don't need it to be perfect. The instructions actually don't say to do this at all, so this is kind of a bonus step. All right, so just quickly before we get to this, there are an absolute ton of lines on this thing because, well, there's actually more lines than fins, but there are 3 fins with the extra doodads. There are 3 fins with no doodads. And then there are 12 of these little decorations that are going to go up here. These need to be sanded. They need to be rounded. I've started doing that, but this is really quite time consuming. So I'm going to do some more of them later in a later video as well. So these are going to go on like this. These are going to go on like this. And there are a total of 12 of these. So we only need 6 for fins. And of the fin lines, we only need 3 for the long ones. So we need to be very, very careful about which fin goes where, because otherwise we're going to make an absolute mess and we're going to ruin everything. So, referring to the instructions, because of course, read the manual, kids. Here's the first fin I'm going to attach. Apparently, I'm attaching the plain regular fins first. And it shows me on the diagram, the marking that I made for the launch lug is going to be kind of like pointed toward me. And then there are 1, 2, and then I'm going to attach it to the third one. So, probably wouldn't hurt to make a little X or something to remind me of that. So here's the launch lug, 1, 2, 3, and I'm attaching it to this fin. And then I'm going to repeat it, but I'm going to put X's on all the plain fins that I'm going to attach. So the next one is going to be one of the fancy fins. 1, 2 more is going to be a regular fin, 2 is a fancy, 2 more is a regular fin, and then 3, 4 more. I did it right. Okay, so now I know which ones I'm going to attach where. Always important. This is like measure twice, cut once, right? Because you do not want to end up with the fins in the wrong places. All right, let's get to work then. So I didn't actually round any of these, and you'd think that you'd probably want to, given that we're rounding so many other things, but the instructions actually don't tell us like anywhere to round them. The only thing that they explicitly say to do is to round these little decorative strafes or whatever you want to call them. So apparently we're just not rounding these, and that's fine. We don't need to. This is, again, not going to be a like competition high flyer. This is for fun, and apparently this part of the alien design is going to be kind of stark and well, not angular, but not curved. So usual trip, glue goes on, wait about 30 seconds, and then put my second layer of glue. And these are going to go right at the very back of the rocket. So that's at least easy. I don't have to measure anything. It's probably close to being enough time. The second one I'm going to do really light because I put probably more glue than I needed on that first layer. This feels pretty heavy. But let's just spread it out. There we go. Okay, time to attach. I've got, this is the first one that the instructions say to do. It really shouldn't matter. Actually, now that I look at, I've got a little bit of glue blobs going on here, so let's spread that a little thinner. Okay. All right. The way I like to do this is I like to kind of line up the first spot and then roll it forward like so. And that's interesting. The X is right where the end of the fin is going to be. Now, I have a nice, the fins here are pretty wide. It's pretty thick balsa. So I've got a lot of surface area here. So hopefully this will set up on the quicker end of things. But I'm not going to rush this. I suspect that in holding it here, it is probably not lined up particularly well. That's okay. We'll get there eventually, but not yet. I just want to make sure this gets affixed as best as I can before I start fooling around with it, because I really don't need that. I don't need this falling off. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a peek. I'm going to brush off any little bits of glue that, like on this side, there's a decent amount of glue that snuck out. And then check for basic alignment. I'm really right now looking down this line more than anything else. And it looks pretty straight. The good news about thicker balsa fins is that it's the bigger the rocket body and the thicker the fin, the easier it is to get them straight up and down perpendicular. So that actually looks pretty good. I'm going to put this vertically. I mean, you can have a look if you want. There it is. Neat. But I'm going to let this sit there, at least for the time being, instead of having it on its side. This way, I'll turn back in frame. Gravity's pulling straight down. It's not pushing off to the side one way or the other. If it would be, if I had this lying on its side like this, then gravity's pulling it down away from the glue. Yes, gravity's still pulling it down, but it's pulling it the long way, which is better. And I'm going to leave it there while I set up my next fins. So I think, for the purposes of our video here, we could probably get these 3 basic fins on and then switch over and do one of the more complicated ones. That would probably be a reasonable use of time. Why exactly the instructions want me to do the basic fins first and then the complicated fins second, I don't know. I can't really think of a reason why that would be preferable. It's probably, if for any reason, just to make sure that we don't put things in the wrong places, because the last thing you want to do is have your fins partially attached and then realize they're not in the right spot and have to try to rip them off without damaging any and everything nearby. Now, if you are doing this on your own, there is kind of a fine line between putting the fins on quickly and giving yourself time for the fins to set up in between. So again, I'm going to put this right at the edge. I'm going to kind of walk it up, and then I'm going to hold it. So the longer you let the fins set, the less you need to worry about one flopping off while you are trying to affix the next one, which is obviously a good thing. You don't want fins flopping off. The bad news is that if you let the fins really, really sit, if you give yourself like 20 minutes in between each one, by the time you are done, the glue will not just be tacky on the first one, it will be fully set. Why would you care? Well, when we're done, at least with this part, I'm going to check the alignment of the rocket as a whole. So like, how do the fins look relative to each other? Because while it's certainly important for the fins to be on the lines are just a guide. Ultimately, what matters more than anything else, I got a little bit of a burr here, so I'm going to sand this off, is how the fins sit relative to each other. I have a little kind of protrusion here that doesn't look so great, so I'm going to try to get that off before I start gluing. And this is time for the glue to set a little bit. Yeah, it looks a lot nicer. How's it back here? You could probably use a little bit of a sanding job here too. Yeah. Anyway, if you let the glue set, if you take too long in between the fins, you're not going to be able to adjust anything really. If you go, I don't want to say quickly, but if you finish things in relatively short order, the glue will be tacky but not set, and then you can make your adjustments without really messing things up. Of course, if you go too quickly and you try to make your adjustments, it's entirely possible the fins are just going to fall off entirely. So there's like this magic butter zone where the fins are mobile and pliable, but not just going to fall entirely off, and then you'll have to start over, because you certainly don't want to do that. That's no fun. Nobody likes doing that. All right. It's also worth noting that the length of time it takes for the fins to get tacky and to completely set is very much dependent upon how much glue you use. The more glue you use, the longer it takes to dry, and that means the longer it takes to get the fins tacky so you can let go, and then eventually for you to make your final adjustments. So I have been personally, but I have been working with younger people who have been building the old Viking kit recently, and also somebody who's working on a beta, or not a beta, a wizard. Yeah, a wizard. And they both use very, very thin fins. If you haven't watched the Viking uses cardstock, thick cardstock, like the stuff that we use in motor mounts. And the wizard uses very thin balsa. And boy, that's tricky stuff, because it doesn't take much for those to fall over, which is kind of tiresome. These are a nice change, nice thick fins that set up nicely. There's enough glue surface area for the glue to really get good purchase. All right, so there's my first set. Now, in the instructions, there is a nice little template here that shows what this ought to look like. So I don't want to right now put the rocket down like this because the fins are very much not firmly established. So I can't really show you this because I'm doing it off camera. But I'm going to put the body here lined up with the circle, and then I'm kind of look down the barrel, and I'm going to get at least a good feeling for how aligned my fins are. It's not going to be perfect, but so that looks pretty good actually. After I've finished attaching the 3 more complicated fins, I'm going to do this again, but I'm going to flip it over and actually have the rocket standing so I can see in exquisite detail how accurate things are. And again, like I said, it is nice because when you're working with bigger rockets, it is easier to get the fins lined up vertically, or perpendicular, I guess I should say, to the rocket body. It just goes more easily. All right, so we're going to do one of these decorative fins here. And then we'll probably wrap up the video for this point. This has a lot of surface area. So I'm actually probably going to need some more glue. Yeah, maybe not. It's actually not bad. The surface area that you're putting the glue on is basically going to be how strong this bond is. But the more glue, the longer it takes to set up as well. So it's kind of a trade-off, at least for our purposes here. I don't think it really matters terribly where I put this one, just so long as it is in between the existing fins. It doesn't really matter where I start. That's probably enough time. And again, the second coat we always put on pretty lightly. This is going to be it's going to be hard to judge, at least in this back part, which is like a sea of glue. But the front part, you can at least see that a little bit better. And again, I'm going quite light because, like I said, I mean, look at that. That's just, it's a sea of glue. I'm going to probably try to take some of that off because there's a lot back there. It's kind of pooling in there because there is a little bit of that conformal shape. A little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. All right, actually, in thinking about this, so this is the fin that I did first because it's just counterclockwise from the launch lug. So I'm going to do this one next because these two are the most dry at this point, which is something that I'd like. Same deal. I'm going to try to walk this up. This one's going to be trickier, though, because the back is so wide. Yeah. And with this much glue, everything is definitely going to want to shift around quite a bit. Now, in looking to see that I'm doing a good job, right? So, because these two, they're not on the line at all. The main fin is, so I can actually look in between the crack and see that the main fin is lined up right on the line that I drew. And that looks pretty good. Now, I can't imagine how I'm going to get into that crack to clean up any glue. So that is basically, that's how that's going to be. I can clean up the outside of it. Shouldn't be too much of a problem. Actually, it wasn't all that much. It squirted out on this side. But yeah, it's still, even at this point that I've been fooling around with it for this much time, it's still a little on the wobbly side. But that's fine. I'm just having a look at it. This one really ought to be easy to make sure that it is perpendicular to the rocket body because there's so much wood in so many places, and it looks pretty good. All right, well, there are 2 more of those for me to do. You probably don't have a whole lot of interest in watching that, so I thank you for watching this much. I will see you in the next part where we finish up, fingers crossed, the construction portion. See you then.